Thank you so much for listening to the Conscious Diva podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Scott Guerin to talk about his new book with co-author, renowned intuitive Nichole Bigley. The book is called Looking for Angels, A Guide to Understanding and Connecting with Angels. This book is an invaluable guide for anyone interested in learning more about angels and other divine beings, as well as learning to connect and communicate with your entire spirit guide team. It also shares the history of angels throughout religion, science, and psychology. Dr. Scott Guerin holds 2 masters and a doctorate in human development, and he concentrates on spiritual development. Nichole Bigley is a psychic intuitive who's been talking to angels her entire life. She is also the host of the extremely popular weekly podcast, A Psychic Story. I hope you enjoy this conversation. And for more information, you can visit the show page at theconsciousdiva.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at theconsciousdiva. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me today, Scott. It's really lovely to have you here. And so looking forward to talking about your new book, Looking for Angels.
Yes, it was a labor of love.
And I'm just going to hold up the book.
Oh, thank you.
And
Oh, and I like you're reading it. That's great.
oh, no,
Noting
I
it.
do read them. I read every book
You
I'm sent.
actually
Oh,
read it.
100%. Oh, yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
thank you. Thank you.
You're
It's
welcome.
always nice.
Yeah, well,
Um,
it's really important because, I have a team of spirit guides and helpers, and I love to read other people's material because you can always learn from other people. And in Nicole's story, there were a lot of similarities.
mm.
There's a lot of crossover, but I would love for you to share your story. So yeah, please let's begin with hearing your story and how you were introduced to angels.
Yeah, well, so I took the traditional path. I've been saying that people get are connected with angels, and meaning connected, I mean like robust interaction. The thing I kind of have come to understand, right? So in for people to have robust connection with angels, not just a casual like, oh, nice idea around the holidays, or the flying cherubs with suction cup darts on Valentine's Day, but really to have a interaction with their spirit team comes about, I believe, in 3 ways. Actually, I just added a fourth way. The first way are people like, I believe, yourself or Nichole, where they just kind of, I call it hardwired. They even know you may have a premonition or a remembrance of being prior to the incarnation of this life. You come down at an early age, you have that connection with Nichole. It's Archangel Michael, and very much from the get-go right there. And then the second way I've observed is through trauma. Unfortunately, people who've gone through a lot of trauma in their lives, it kind of pushes them, to reach out and look into and get connection with that and get help, from the spirit world, the spirit team. Uh, the third way is near death experiences. I've been delving into that quite in depth lately. And during those times, people see a lot of things, including spirits and past loved ones. And, there's certainly the bright light in the tunnel and all that. But in addition to that, and then the fourth way, I say the rest of us have to learn. We have to, you come into the world and then you just have a slow awakening. And so for me, I had an interest in connecting with spirit from the get-go. 13 years old, Lutheran church. I zeroed in on the sermons. That's all I cared about. Just looking for that connection. And then going through that to the conservative Christian phase. And at that time when I was a teenager, I wanted answers, and they certainly provide answers. But the other thing that got me, and I didn't realize this until just recently, was the hook was the personal relationship with Jesus. If you remember that movement, that's what they led with, was having a personal, and that's what I initially wanted, because I wanted that connection. And then after a number of years, I kind of realized it was kind of a pretty narrow way of looking at things, and left that, went into the Presbyterian church, and then again, all out, into whatever church I was in, whatever tradition I was in, I was all in and did everything. So I was an elder, taught Sunday school, junior high Sunday school, which was a trip for like 15 years. And then, despite all that, my life just fell apart. Like, my personal life fell apart. And then I was crying out, to Jesus, to God, to anybody to help. And it didn't work. Nothing was working. So I kind of went through a very dark time in my life. And then I said, and I still emerged saying, like, I need to have that connection, but not religion this time, not organized religion. And then that's when I dove head first into psychology and science, to see if spirit exists, if we can have a connection with spirit outside of organized religion. And that's when, and that actually, that story is in that first book that you mentioned, is a spiritual journey. And I did pick all that and all the stories and crazy stuff and possessions and a lot of different things going on. But I hope to, in presenting my story that way, hopefully people who are just curious can say, like, hey, I felt that way too, or whatever it may be. So and this is where I connect with Nichole and Angels, was that I was selling that book. I have two books about what I've learned along the way. And I was at and I wanted something a little more specific. I was very much into meditation, very much in practice. Went to the Vipassana. I don't know if you're familiar with the Buddhist 10-day session. That was, well, life transforming, those types of things.
Yeah.
And I was great. It was very good. I felt good for years, but I started like wanting something a little more specific, a little more focus on something. And I thought, yeah, angels, that would be it. Um, and then I read the account of Carlos Santana, which is chapter 2 in the book. And so very quickly, Carlos Santana, R&B guitarist, one of
Yes.
the best guitarists in the world. I loved him, and then I noticed that he hadn't done anything for a number of years. I read a Rolling Stone article about him in the early 2000s. It was written in 2000, but and I'm like, well, let's see. I loved his album that came out, that Supernatural, won a lot of Grammys,
Wow.
10 years after he did anything.
Mhm.
And so the article is about him and that journey. And what happened was, it started out with his deep spiritual connection, and how he kind of happenstance got to meet with a group that channeled Metatron, Archangel Metatron. And that was a big, like, timeout, Metatron. I don't know about this, got to know about Metatron. And that Metatron pretty much said, you're going to have a very successful album. And that's what happened. And it came out in 99 and 2000, and it was very successful. And then he was, right after he won a Grammy for the best album, Metatron and he connected again, and Metatron said, um, we've given you a tremendous experience. Now we want something back. And he was freaked out a little bit, like, what is this about? Like, what does he want? you know, and Metatron said, we want you to tell the world about your abuse. And it turned out that he was abused almost every other day, for 2 years, sexually abused. And when he was 10 to 12 years old, and he never told anybody about this. And so he resisted. He was like, this is embarrassing. And, we can imagine all the things you don't want people to know about. But Metatron said, no, because through you, people will be healed. And sure enough, that's what he did. He went on a media tour, Time Magazine, Newsweek, all the radio shows, TV shows, not all of them, but many of them, to share his story, and that his message is that I came through this, so can you. And that was the time when the big lawsuits came against the Catholic Church for the abuse within the church. And so many millions of, I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of people,
Globally,
boys
actually. It
mainly.
wasn't just a movement here in the US.
Yes, right, right. And so it was that time that was coming out. And at that time is when Carlos had his message and, rolling on the popularity of him, of his comeback type of thing, and album. And to this day, Nichole and I go back and forth, and we're like, what's the biggest, angel intervention story? I'm like, that's it for me. It's modern day in 2025 years ago,
Yeah.
that it happened. So I was on that, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do a book on angels. So I made a post. I was at a holistic healthcare
Well, let me just
expo.
interrupt you for
Sure,
just a moment. And
sure.
so I know you're a doctor, but what are you, science is your background. Just quickly explain a little bit about that, because you were
Oh,
a Christian, you were
mhm.
really committed to your faith, but you also had a very practical background in science
Yes,
and still do. So
yes.
bring this forward, because there's a lot of people who maybe don't believe, and I always say, it's not about belief, it's about trust. And similarly to
Mm,
Nichole, your co-author of the book, because when we trust, it's a feeling, it's a vibration,
mm,
inherently
mhm.
feel in our bodies, that trust, where belief can really come in as a thought, right? You can
Yes,
be persuaded to believe something, but you can't be persuaded to trust. So
right.
just bring that in from your background, and how you arrived at this place of trust. I love the Carlos Santana story, and when I read that in your book,
Mm.
it was great. That was a beautiful connection to share, and as a man as well.
Well, and then just a thought on beliefs. A belief is just a thought that you think about over and over and over again. And we all choose our beliefs,
Mhm.
because a lot of people now, they'll come up like, I don't believe in angels. You're off the charts. It's
Yeah.
different
Oh,
from what
you're
we grew
crazy.
up. And then I said, one of my stories was a good friend of mine, a friend of 60 years. He said, I liked your book, but I'm not into the angels thing, unless there's scientific proof. Now I knew he was a good Catholic, and I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah. You can't prove that there's an angel or anything like that." I said, "So you're scientifically validated on everything?" Yeah. So you believe in the virgin birth, the resurrection, and forgiveness of sins, without any evidence, but and then he got it. Like, yeah. So, and then the point of that is that we choose what to believe.
Mhm.
But going back to my academic endeavors was, and somebody asked me this the other day, was like, usually people that have an extensive academic background, specifically in spirituality, they do that to disprove. But you don't do that. I'm like, that's very interesting. And the reason is that I went into psychology and the science to understand, to make that connection, not to disprove it. So in a sense, I had the belief going in, and I was looking to find, the connection. And that's what you do, is you look at, the big thing is theory based, reasoning and writing. So everything in academia, all the colleges, they all, if you say anything, you should have a theory behind it, or backup. Even if it's not empirical, you say, well, this esteemed professor
Yeah,
said it, so I'm
I need
quoting him.
evidence.
Yeah, yeah, it is evident. You need evidence, whether it's empirical or just authoritative, and that. So I explore all that, because my specific purpose in this life is to help the people that are just at the interest, curious, not sure. 80% of the world is Judeo-Christian, Muslim, Hindu, or Buddhism. There's still we still have the bulk of the world coming from organized religion background, and just as I did, and that's kind of what I'm here for. But as far as what my message is, we all at some point you have to make a leap of faith and believe. Whether it's the Torah or the Quran or the Vedas. At some point, you have to just decide, oh, I believe that's true. And then certainly it may or may not match up with your experience. But what's happening now in modern day angels is there are other sources. And Neil Donald Walsh was, I think, for me, was the first one to really come out and say, he certainly had his 21 books or whatever that was downloaded by Spirit. And he said, God didn't stop speaking to humanity, 2000 years ago. He's speaking now, and he never stopped. And so you have these other sources, certainly, like Neil Donald Walsh. You have the Course in Miracles, which I'm going through in depth now, which is really wonderful. I never did it to that extent, but really came from Jesus. Then you have the other collectives, the Seth, the Abraham Hicks, all kinds of things that once we open our mind, and to people who are new and skeptical, I say, you don't have to agree with this. You can, but just open your mind. There's one thing I have very little patience for is people who have a closed mind. Like, no, some people know me my whole life. They open up this book, they see the word psychic, and they're done. They're done. And it's like, why are you doing that? You don't have to agree with it. And let's have a discussion. So the belief for me was always there in a quest, and maybe a belief that I can connect. And then certainly through working with Nichole on the podcast she's had that podcast, a psychic story, for 5 years, where every week there's a new intuitive, medium, a psychic, energy healer, whatever. And I was eating that up. So that's where I kind of got into it. And then certainly working with her, my spiritual life has exploded, beyond my belief, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And it also it doesn't mean that if you are a person of an organized religion and have that's your faith, that you haven't had a spiritual experience. Perhaps you're just not sharing it. Right?
Yes, right.
There are a lot of people who are devout Catholics and have had profound experiences.
Mhm.
People a lot of Catholics who go to Lourdes, in France, they go to the Virgin, to Mary Magdalene, to her, not the Virgin, but Mary Magdalene, and they travel, they're pilgrims, they go on these spiritual pilgrimages to have, either some kind of a healing from her, or just to
Yes,
receive the vibration, right?
right.
They are serious about their religion.
Yeah.
Likewise with Hindus, there's so many different deities in that tradition, which I love.
Mhm.
And you can have, and I have personally experienced many profound communication with the various deities that I work with. My
Mm.
actual practice is rooted in Tantra and more recently in Nepalese shamanism, in the caste Nepali tradition from the Himalayas. And so we work with my teacher, who's a 27th generation Nepalese shaman. We really work in communion very
Mm.
closely, activating this relationship on a frequency and a vibration, so that we can
Mhm.
call into harmony. We can work with them in different ways, work with spirits, nature beings, but also the various energies of the deities themselves.
Mm.
And so it's
Mhm.
quite a profound practice that I love, and it's a part of my
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
And it's
So
important that you bring that up because, my story has been, organized religion didn't do anything for me,
yes.
but certainly there is lots of life, and robust connections can be made within that. And then even for me, I mean, just recently, like the last 3 months, I've made a reconnection with Jesus, because I was so burnt, and by that narrow view, and exclusionary view of Christianity, that I just like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. But coming back, and it's been wonderful because I studied in depth all his teachings and whatever at the time, but in that kind of perspective of like, this is the only way. And now it's just different. It's just different. You know what I say. I did a post the other week that if Jesus came back today, his message would be the same. He would be considered a radical, and he would be rejected by many Christians, and that would think that he's a lefty socialist. So the real Jesus, and that's coming through in the Course of Miracles, which I highly recommend, in depth, kind of working through that. But um, yeah, so that's kind of been my journey with that, and then uh, I've really been opening up to my spirit team. I've been adding my spirit team one by one in a sense, and doing that. So it's been quite a journey for me.
Yeah, that I'm going to ask you about that in a moment. Well, Jesus is also considered an ascended master, so he can also appear to people as part of their spirit team. Uh,
Yes,
who have nothing to do with Catholicism or Christianity
right.
or anything. He
That's
can
it.
become,
That's
he
it.
can literally appear. And there are even stories that he walked across the Himalayas and came there and then early on and received a lot of teachings and then went back. So there's a little bit of crossover there, but it's
Like Jesus the mystic,
exactly right,
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
a mystical master,
yeah,
for wisdom.
yeah.
I like that story. I
Mm,
feel like that feels like a nice, like a truth to me.
mm,
And
mm,
I went to an all girls private girls school growing up in Sydney, and it was Catholic, and we actually had nuns.
mm, mm,
And it teaching us, our headmistress was a nun, but we had a very forward thinking lay teacher who was male who taught religious studies. And he would bring in rabbis during Passover, right before
mm,
Easter. He
mm,
thought it was important for all of us to be exposed to different teachings. And he would talk a lot about Hinduism and Buddhism. And so it was amazing to be exposed to have this really great teacher who was so open to other religions, knowing that we were living in a predominantly white society. It was an all girls school. We were taught by nuns. it was
mm,
it was
mm,
Catholic, and that we really should learn about other
mm.
things, which I really loved because I actually had lived in Asia until I was 8 and came to Australia.
Oh,
And so there I
wow.
fully exposed to Buddhism in Bangkok, where there are
Mm,
Buddhist, the Buddhist tradition is prevalent. You have them, the temples are everywhere. You see the Buddhist monks in their
mm,
orange robes with their rice bowls. And I loved that. It was something that I actually really missed when
mm.
we moved to Australia, because it felt very strange to not have to have known that since baby, for the first
Yeah,
baby
to
years of
have
my
that,
life, and
right.
then to come to a country where it was like, wow, wait, hang on a second, where have all the
Yeah,
temples gone?
right, right.
So tell me, what was you're now in a situation where you, or do want to call it a situation, you now, as a part of your life, acknowledge and feel into your spirit team, right?
Yeah.
Who are your guides and helpers?
Well, it's interesting you said initially situation, because Nichole and I go back and forth on this. I say, I thank you and I blame you for helping me open up, because you get crazy stuff is going on, roller coasters and crazy interactions and these things that go along with being open to the spiritual
Yes, the
world
shifts
and
that come,
things.
right?
Yes, it's like it's
The
not
shake up.
yes, right, it's a shakeup. And sometimes you need to turn your life upside down, in certain parts of your life upside down to grow.
Yes.
But yeah, so it first started out for me was I helped produce the podcast, and I'm a guest on some of the listener episodes on a psychic story. And one guest we had an animal whisperer, animal spirit person,
Communicated. Yeah.
a communicator. Yeah. And then she said, everyone has, it's like, that's how I started out. Like, people say, like, everyone, Carolyn Mice, right? Medical intuitive, world renowned, can, read people. And she said, anyone can be a medical intuitive, or you hear a medium, like, anyone is a medium. And I'm like, shut up. Like, get out of here. And so this one person said, everyone has a spirit animal. So I'm
Mm.
like, okay, I'm going to try this in an open way, not sarcastic. I went to bed one night, and she said, the person said, you just ask for a spirit animal. And so one night went to bed, she said, "Could I have my spirit animal? Love to. If I can have one, please show me my spirit animal." Next morning, and to this day, this has been, I mean, 8 or 9 months now, is Shira, a leopard, and she is always here, always right on my right side, um, and just as my guide. And what is the purpose of your spirit animal? For me, it's strength, it's wisdom, it's looking. They're always looking around, and a comfort. So I'm like, that is so cool. And then when I tell some of my friends, and they're like, really, really, Scott, there's so this is the environment I live in. But um and so the next was, and I didn't even ask for this. Growing up, we had a dear friend of the family. He was a high school teacher for my siblings and I was in this, we were all into sports. I was in the wrestling team, and during the summer, and he was a true teacher at heart, and I latched on to that. Not spiritual things, but just in general, and about life. And so he would take us on bicycle rides in the summers, a bunch of us. And so one day we were talking, and he goes, "Hey, I was out by your house. I had moved west by about an hour." He goes, Marilyn and I were out by you the other night. There's a restaurant there by you." And I'm like, why don't you call me? That's a mile from my house. We could have had dinner. And he goes, I was busy, whatever. So fast forward about a year or two after that, he passed with mesothelioma
Mm.
and died in 2015. And so, again, like right around 9 months ago, my wife and I were riding down this road past the restaurant, and where he mentioned, and as clear as a bell, like almost like he was sitting in the back seat and leaning up between the two front seats, like, "I was there. I told you about that." And I'm like, "Bob?" That's like, "Is that you?" And then that was it. And I embraced that, and I said, like, "Thank you for being here," and so, and then the way I explain it is, from time to time from then on, um, and this is a good distinction, because there was times when I would remember things that he would say, like, "A place for everything, and everything in a place," like that. That's how it, but everyone that would know him was like, "Yeah, that's something that Bob would say." But other times he'll comment on a specific situation that's going on, like, "Oh, he's his own worst enemy." I'm on a call. I'm like, I'll hear that, like, "That's right, Bob." So it's that type of thing. So I,
Well, let's just talk about that for a sec, because
Mhm,
you bring up a really valid point with intuition, with
mhm,
tuned in, right? And there is a distinction between hearing the communication that comes through. Sometimes it's audible. Same for
mhm,
me. My guides also, I hear it very clearly. Sometimes they'll scream, shout, not scream like a human screaming,
yeah,
but
yeah,
use a louder voice to get my attention. Or don't. An example is last winter. So I live in Vermont. We get a lot of snow.
mhm,
Last winter, they said very clearly I had to go pick up my daughter in a snowstorm.
mm.
Don't take was one of the
Oh,
comments.
yes, yes.
Don't take that car.
Mhm,
And I which was the bigger of the two of our cars, and they said take the Mini, right? And you
mm,
think a Mini Cooper in the
yeah,
snowstorm. Both cars had winter tires on, and it was very clear. And I said, okay, aloud, okay, I guess you're
mhm,
going to show me why.
yeah,
And I knew that was serious. I left in the Mini, and the snow was accumulating really quickly. Snowplows were out. It didn't really matter, it was they couldn't clear the snow fast enough, and I wasn't going very far, but I didn't know exactly where I was picking her up. I hadn't been to their home before, and there was so much snow, barely a space to turn around. There was one little area that I was able to, in that moment, I said to aloud, okay, this is the reason you said not to take the other car. Because
mm.
I literally, it was the
Oh, yeah,
tiny turning space to just
right.
literally turn the Mini in, turn it around, get out,
Mhm.
and be able to
Wow,
turn out. And if I'd had the other car,
right. You've been
which was
stuck.
a bigger vehicle, but an electric car too, much heavier, I would have
Mm,
got stuck. And then
mm,
2 days later, when I was driving the other car, I learned that the winter tires on that car were completely worn out. So I had no traction
Oh,
on those, which I was
wow.
feeling anyway driving. Could feel the difference in the slickness.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, I just share that story because that was very clear and it was audible and it was being communicated to me in a very distinct way. And I trusted and I knew that was the right thing to do. No, listen to
Mhm.
them.
Mm.
Where you said with your friend, he's telling you things, and that's a real, you can feel him there. You know,
Yeah.
it's really him from the other side speaking to you versus memories or your imagination.
Right,
So
right.
just talk to that point for a moment, like tuning in, and especially for people who, because you're relatively new to this, so it's really great for you to share how
Mm.
you started to strengthen your trust. How were
Yeah.
you able to then discern this is really, that's Bob. Yes, I feel
Mm.
you. And
Yeah.
that sense that, it's warming in your heart, it's love versus, am I imagining that? Wait, am I nuts? Like, should I
Yes.
tell my wife that I think I heard him? So
Yeah.
how are you strengthening that?
Well, yeah, like as I mentioned, you certainly have to have an open mind, and kind of let go, let go. And, we always have a reference, as they say, we always see the past and whatever, because we always see what we've learned, up until now. And so if you're reforging new experiences and new territory, it's unlearned stuff. So we always try and make a connection to the past. And it's, to really move forward, you need to kind of let go of things at times. And knowing that maybe even your own thoughts or your friends or family, if you share with this, it's not going to be like, hey, that's great. It's going to be like, really, is that really happening? So you have to go on with that. It's like, New Testament analogy. If you have a light, you don't put it under a bushel. You just say, okay, that's uh, here I am. Here's my life. And so the one thing I found with the inner voices or inspiration is that, and I don't know, but if I feel like I can change the dialogue, like if I get a sentence or some thoughts, if I can change that, then I know that it's me. But if I feel I can't, then I know it's from spirit. I mean, there is a sensation that it's coming, a little more direct. But in the very subtle times, thoughts, if you can change that, and like, then that's just one thing. And then, and I've just been coming out with this recently. I've been scrying, last several months. And,
Well, tell
I
us what
just,
scrying is. I know what it is, but
yeah.
share what scrying is.
Uh,
What's it?
so, so scrying is basically, you get in a darkened room, not totally pitch black, but there's a mirror. You get a small mirror or even some sort of mirror, and then a candle that you put nearby, the mirror. And so there's kind of a darkened area, mirror reflecting into your face, your eyes with the candle. And you just kind of sit there, and just kind of, let your mind go, meditate, empty your mind, your thoughts. And then you just, if, when you're moved to, you just start writing. And it's not automatic writing like some people, physically, their hand physically writes. That's one way, automatic writing. Another way is just you have a stream of thought in your mind, and sentence after sentence, and you just write what you're getting. And so that's what scrying is. It's many people shy away from it because it's deemed a divination tool. It's used in Wiccan and those types of things. But if you look past that to think of it as a way that spirit can get in touch with you and communicate through you, um,
But there's
y-
also nothing wrong with it being a divination tool. I mean,
right, right,
it is, it
yeah, it's
absolutely
the
is a divination tool.
connotations.
I
That's what I was
mean,
saying. Like we refer to what we've learned, and if you learn that, then you're gonna shy away. But um, for me, it's the Palladians. That I call it. It's like for months, I'm like, who is? I wonder who this is. And then I can't ask questions. That's the thing. You can't. It's like it's just a download, and I can't like respond back. If I'm thinking about something, they may address it, in the right, and they may not. I don't know. But it's an experience, and it's all positive. and it's been very helpful in that way. So, you just have to kind of go with it. And even just saying this, I feel in a few of the podcasts that I've been on, you just say it and I tell people about it. And we went to a medium, some friends of ours went to medium, and they were looking for past loved ones. And I had kind of a connection, and I asked the person, like, so, like, is it always a past loved one that comes through on these sessions? And she said, no. Why do you ask? I go, well, I think I'm getting a visit from a Palladian, a person from Pleiades. And she said, well, that's good. You got to be careful, do your protections. But anyway, so, and then I haven't talked with those people, but I mean, they're kind of open that they went to a medium, but then going from talking to past loved ones to extraterrestrials is another step. But
Yes, and Caroline Miss also, I'm sure I mean, you mentioned her earlier, you've read her book.
yeah,
She's very communication with them. So,
yes,
and you've probably learned some techniques from reading her books about how to
yes,
self
yeah,
up to that flow that's
mm,
and that's a star system that is very benevolent
yes,
and filled with loving guidance. Uh,
yeah,
so I know in the book Looking for Angels, there are a lot of tips for the reader on how to strengthen. But also, you mentioned you couldn't ask questions. But in the book, there's Nichole.
oh
Obviously,
yes,
she has
oh
shared
yeah, yeah,
tips to ask questions, and I often ask questions, but perhaps it's not from the Pleiades. Maybe
no, I
as a
yeah,
star system, that's not right for you to tune into. But your other guides in your team, surely you must. I feel with my guides, there's a representative. And when I work with my clients, there's always one voice that speaks that
mm-hmm,
represents the communication that comes through when I'm
mm-hmm,
and when I do my own work for myself, so for example, Monday and Thursdays are days that I specifically work with a deity known as Nagakanya. And on those days, if I have any questions, and that's from my teacher's tradition, she's from a goddess in my teacher's tradition, I'll work with her specifically for things. Other times, I'll tune into my spirit animal, who's a horse, and his name is Z,
mm,
and it's
mm,
spelled DZI, like the Z, like the Tibetan Z bead,
mm,
interestingly, and he told me that. And so sometimes it's different things for him. And I will go to my special meditation, my inner place, as Nichole describes, going to your inner sacred space versus
mm-hmm,
a
yes,
shelter or physical place outside of the body. And I go there with him.
mm-hmm,
And then that's quite a beautiful experience. So for you, maybe it's not the Pleiades as a star system, although maybe those beings haven't fully come into you yet.
right, that's
Obviously
what
settling, right? With you.
yes,
Are you asking did you say, is her name? I know you talk about her in your book. No, it's not Sheba,
Shira, yes,
Shira. And
Shira.
does she
um
guide you? Do you communicate with her?
No, not directly. She's more of as a stable presence. Certainly, my other guides, I mean, Archangel Michael, Jesus, who I mentioned, is definitely, I feel a presence as well, and among others. Like, and some of them, and actually, I keep forgetting to do this. I had a reading, and the woman said there's like three American Indian guides, women, that are you're part of your team. And I felt them. I've always felt them, but then the more I thought about, the more I feel their presence. And then somebody said, "Well, do you know their names?" I go, "No." I said, "Well, why don't you ask them what their names are?" I'm like,
Yes,
"Okay, I'll do that."
exactly.
But
Yeah.
I took a course in
Oh, did you?
mediumship.
Did you ask the names?
No, I didn't yet, and
Oh, you
I'm
haven't
just
yet.
thinking,
Okay.
like, I don't know why, but I just, I'd like to do that, and I have to put that intention out. But sometimes, and certainly the scrying it might be just that method, for me,
Mhm.
but otherwise, I've been building and noticing the interaction with my spirit team, looking for specific answers, looking for the what I'm to do next. Right, I worked my whole life. I am fortunately in a position where I don't need to have a full-time job, and so my full-time job recently has been the book and promoting it, and I'm working, and then recently been getting strong directions and being told like you have another book on awakening coming out next year, that you're going to see all synchronicities kind of come together with it. But sometimes I took a course on mediumship, and I had this very vivid dream one night, and I asked the instructor, I said, um, so I had this dream, and I felt like I was meeting in a room with my spirit team. There I sense who they were: Archangel Michael, these three women, and then Shira was there, Bob. But they were like on the other part of the room, and I was sitting offside, and I felt like it was like a status meeting, like they were working on my life, and they're like, hold on, stay over there for a minute. We're working on what your next steps are going to be. And she said, well, that's definitely what happened. That's what is happening here. But anyway, so that type of involvement is where I'm at.
Love that. I love that. And so, well, what about angels? Since the title of the book is Looking for Angels,
Yes, yes.
are there angels that you have as a part of your spirit team? Because as Nichole mentions, we all have archangels or angels, at least one, maybe up to five or more in our spirit team.
Yeah, well, certainly a guardian angel. There's debate as everyone in the world assigned one. Is there more? But definitely, I feel the presence of a guardian angel at times. It's that in that don't go down that road, or it's time to do this, or those types of things. Archangel Gabriel is, to me, when I'm writing, especially spiritual based books, he's the one who's downloading like paragraphs, and that's why I joke with people. I'm like, I know I'm automatic writing when I'll be writing, and then like a little blip, like a blink of time will pass, and then this paragraph, like I'm reading it back, like, this is brilliant. I didn't write this, but so that happens. And that's what we wanted to do with the book is, the first part going through, different religions, and, just a brief review of science and psychology. But then the second part of the book is really a step by step how to connect with your angel team. And meditation is a very key thing, and that's when I call it, we have to unplug from the reality show, TV show world, buzzers and whistles and spinning dials, and you got to quiet your mind. And that's when the peace, the verse, the peace of God that passes all understanding, you get these connections. And so for me, it's like a clarification. Oh, and then the book will take us through steps like that, and then how to call on specific entities, how to set up energetic boundaries so you feel safe. Because many of my friends, they'll say like, I get it with angels, but I'm afraid because I might start asking for an angel and some demon will come in, and my life will be ruined. And I'm like, no, there's ways to protect yourself and know that you are protected in those types. So it's those types of steps that we felt the book was so usable for people that are just getting into it. And then also we get into the descriptions of the archangels and ascended masters and deities, and how to call on them, what they're known for, to help with. So even if people are accustomed to connecting, and picking, in a sense, calling upon angels, you can do that.
Well, the biggest takeaway for me with the book is that it's all about love, right?
Mm,
So there isn't anything to be afraid of because we're all connected to source. We all come from the same place, this beautiful, loving place of oneness. And it's the place that we all return to when we leave our physical bodies. And I
mm,
loved that Nichole actually describes that because that's something I've always believed as well. And I had an experience in a journey with this exact thing where I journeyed to source and experienced the loving awareness that comes from that people like
mm.
Ram Dass talk about, and in many spiritual traditions. And then where it's the place where we will return, and that there's nothing to fear, in terms
Mm.
of
Yes.
uh, beings coming to us, benevolent beings. Of course, there is always a dark with a light, but in when we're communicating with or asking our guardian angels for support, that is very much benevolent energy and coming
Mm.
directly from love.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of tips that help you in your book tune into that loving awareness so that
Yes.
we become
Yes.
centered and whole and really quiet ourselves. Even if you've had no experience with meditating before, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter because it's just you. Nichole has some nice techniques of slowing down the breath and
Yes. Yes.
really getting into that space, that zone, to allow your mind to be open to
Mhm.
feeling into whoever's in your team there, right?
Yes. Yes. The audio book is great for that too, because we recorded, I think there's like 7 different meditations for specific things, and
Oh,
it's
where
nice
are
to look.
those? Are they on the Looking for Angels website?
Well, on Amazon. Yeah, on the books are available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. The audio book is specifically on Kindle and well, ebook and then audiobook through Amazon. But that can help quite a bit as well. And then just you mentioned angels, uh, we um, we put in like 17 angel stories from that listeners from the podcast had sent in, and all from the get go. I always love the stories that people say, like, I heard a bump, something downstairs in the next room, and I go in and I just saw this globe or this ball of light, and it might be a different, maybe white, maybe bluish, who knows, but it was just a ball of light, formless, and they just experienced unconditional love, and it like for 15 seconds, and it changed their lives. It's like you don't that's all you need. You don't need a figure. I mean, people, certainly can help, and many times, but just to experience that to me is wonderful. I wish that someday I could experience that.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
On some level, on a subtle level, I'm sure you're already experiencing.
Yes, right. Yeah, I do have that, but yeah, see something to just like blow your mind, in 15
Yeah,
seconds is
I have a lot of orbs where I live, and it's really magnificent to bask in
yeah,
that loving
that
glow, that
feeling.
light for a
Yeah.
moment. It's just it's wild, and it often happens when I'm just standing alone looking at the trees in the forest. I live on
Yes,
and
nature.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, I can feel that love there, that benevolence,
Mm,
and the harmony. There's a symbiotic harmony. And
mm,
my archangel, one of my guardian is he's Archangel Chamuel. Most recently, I've been communicating quite a bit with. It's great. It's beautiful. I really enjoyed reading your book. It was wonderful. So
mm.
tell us, well, firstly, is there anything else? What is there a standout story that you want to share, or any other thing that you think listeners might want to listen to right
I
now, be
I
told?
think, yeah, I think the most important part of, a takeaway for this book is that it is a guide, and we say that right on the subtitle, a guide to understanding, connecting. So wherever you are, and for me, my bias is for people who are just curious, just getting into it, maybe a little afraid, kind of doing that. And then certainly you can take it in the book, you can take it to well beyond that as well. So wherever you are in your life, you can kind of plug in. It's not a novel that you read from a beginning to end. It really is a guidebook to revisit many times. So that is our wish, and that is what the instructions were, to create a book to tell the world about us, about the angels, and how to connect. So hopefully we've done a good job. And there's many other resources out there, but we think ours is a little special.
I loved it. It's really simple and very tangible, and it's easy for somebody who's a beginner to read that and say, okay, now I know what steps I need to,
Right,
or if they're
exactly.
even curious about it. And even for people who've been in communication with their spirit teams for a long time, there's also nice reminders,
Yes,
things
yes.
in there too. Thank you so much for sharing your book with me. And where can we get your book? I know you mentioned Amazon.
Yes, it's
Where
on
else?
Amazon. Yeah, and then all the bookstores. And there's a website for the book called lookingforangelsbook.com. There's a gift box there, signed copies, etc. And then it all links to Amazon and Barnes and Noble, etc. So, and support your local bookstore where possible.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.